Hello everyone, it is Joe here from OmniPoke, the channel that brings you guys everything Pokemon. If you're looking for PTCGO codes, the Potown store is the place to go. You can even get a 5% discount on your orders using that OmniPoke code. For today's video, we're going to be continuing to look at the new decks from Cosmic Eclipse. This time it's going to be a very interesting non-GX variant in Raichu. We've sort of seen this Nuzzle deck before, kind of flop, thanks to that Raichu GX that we had from Shining Legends. The idea was to flood the board with a bunch of energies and then try and start swinging with the Raichu. Problem with that archetype was, well, it was a slow stage 1 that was also giving up 2 prizes when being knocked out. And also the Raichu had a 2 energy attack cost, so when you were getting knocked out, you're trying to rely on things like EXP share to make up for you losing essentially 40 damage each time. So it's all these sort of things wrapped together that made the Raichu deck not all that efficient, but there's a lot of reasons why this second version of basically the same deck could be a lot more promising. So let's jump into the basic concept. Thanks to the new Raichu having the Nuzzle attack, it really does open up the doors for the entire deck to be searchable via Emolga, which is really awesome. Emolga is a free retreating great starter Pokemon for you that has that Nuzzly generator. Oh no, what's it called? It's like a Nuzzly gathering ability. And it gets you any Pokemon that has the Nuzzle attack in it. So it previously got all your Pikachus down pretty easily, but you still had to have a lot of search just to get your Raichus in the first place. Now, you can also get your stage 1s out, which is really awesome. So Emolga is a multi-purpose searching tool in this deck, which is great. We've got the same Pachirisu that can just flood that board of energy. That was never the problem with the Raichu GX build. Pachirisu was always just a great card to have. It gives us really great acceleration early on in the game, thins the deck out for us magnificently to give us a lot better consistency once we've done our initial attack, so that we really are just like running into just good trainers and stuff throughout the mid game, which is really important. And yeah, Raichu can hit pretty decently well if you've used Pachirisu for the full value of getting all your Nuzzle Pokemon in play. Like if you are able to accelerate like 5 energy, that's incredible. That's 100 just straight away, and then you've got manual attachments throughout the rest of the game. So I mean, the damage output is most of the time going for like 2-hit KOs, hopefully a little bit more against tag teams thanks to Electropower. But the real hope for this archetype is that you're able to 1-hit KO things like Dedenes with Great Catcher. I think that's definitely going to be a big reason why non-GX decks might be successful in this meta, is because we have such better means of gusting now, and it's gusting via a trainer card rather than a supporter, which is so insane really, because all these setup decks need to keep drawing into cards, so they need to keep using powerful draw supporters throughout the entire game, whereas previously they had the sort of headache of being like, oh, I can't Guzma now because I need to go ahead and find my next Pokemon and attach an energy to it and do all this other stuff. Now you can just like win all on your final turn. Like even if you've been stamped down to a low hand size or something, you've got Sprint, you've got a supporter that you can try and play, and then you can just use your Great Catcher for games. So I'm really hoping that Raichu is doing enough, especially in the late game, to knock out things like Dedenne in 1 hit, which is a really big deal for just helping us close and get a big advantage against other GX-based decks. So here are the Pokemon. I really have tried to make it as simple as possible because I believe the strength of this archetype is trying to make the most out of Nuzzly Gathering and the most out of Snuggly Generator, the attack from that Pachirisu. That's why you're seeing 4 orbs of both of these sort of setup-based Pokemon, giving us 8 optimal starts in the deck, which is really, really high, and should give us really good odds of having like decent openings here. So the Snuggly Generator attack from Pachirisu says, for each of your bench Pokemon that has the Nuzzle attack, search your deck for a lightning energy and attach it to that Pokemon. Another thing that I also sort of forgot to mention with the Raichu GX, because it didn't have that Nuzzle attack, it meant that if we were trying to like save a second turn of Snuggly Generator, instead of like going in and just starting off with Powerful Spark, it meant that you basically couldn't evolve your Pikachus. Now you can like happily just play down every Raichu that you have in hand and go for a second Snuggly Generator if you're trying to build up to like much higher damage output. So that's really important. The Pachirisu also has that second attack Nuzzle, so it's searchable via the Emolga, so it all works out pretty nicely here. Emolga, of course, that ability, I'll reiterate myself. Once during a turn, you may search your deck for a Pokemon that has the Nuzzle attack, reveal it and put it into your hand. So that's basically all 12 of the Pokemon that you're seeing on the top line here. Because we have this great promo Pikachu in format. SM162 is a 60 hit point Pikachu, which is actually pretty relevant, of course, because we're going to have that as part of our draw engine. well, it's part of our supporter line to Elm turn 1, because, as I said, you want to make the most out of Snuggly Generator, and the way you do that is by getting as many Pikachus down into play as quickly as possible, as well as any like Emolgas that you found in those opening turns. That's pretty much the entire deal. Obviously, Emolga, as soon as you find one, you can go ahead and find a Pikachu for free anyway, so that's always a great Pokemon to find. That's why we max it out. Same reason why we're maxing out Raichu. Of course, he's our main attacker, so we got to make sure we have access to this guy. Great search ability via the Emolga, that's never really an issue. And Powerful Spark, just for 1 lightning, does 20 times the amount of lightning attached to all of your Pokemon. So, very simple. We try and get lots of yellow energies into play and do the most with that Powerful Spark. That's the whole idea. We have a Ditto Prism. It doesn't have the Nuzzle attack, so you've got to put it down carefully. But really, it's just so that we don't run out of attackers. That's really the whole reason why it's in here. We have 1 Tapu Koko Prism Star. Being a nice reload of energy is always good, because of course, when these Raichus are getting knocked out, it's still a -20, and you'd rather just sort of recover that in the mid-game at some point. 1 Mew to defend against all these annoying sniping Pokemon, be it things trying to deal with your Zebstrika, especially if people are going down the great catcher route. Their only real means of dealing with Zebstrika is probably going to be sniping attacks. Also, of course, it can help out against like Tag Bolt, can help out against the new Reshiram with its GX attack as well, so Mew's a pretty important card for non-GX decks, I'd say. And then we are playing a 1/1 line of Zebstrika. I don't want to have it much thicker than this. We already have Ditto to be like an extra basic for this Blitzle. But that's really just because we don't want to start with this card, basically. You don't want to start with any of the cards on the bottom row, really. Because it just eats up a space for Snuggly Generator to be, you know, like 20 less damage effectively for you. So you don't really want to ever start this card. You just want to sort of find it in the mid-game, put it down, and then just have the Zebstrika in play to stamp-proof yourself. That's basically the whole reason why it's in here. Because otherwise it could be a little bit awkward, because as I mentioned already, most of the time the way we're going to try and close the game is just by dealing with Dedenne, because we won't really ever reach enough damage with Powerful Spark to knock out like tag teams or anything like that, or even like regular GXs. It's only really things like Dedenne that will normally be in range for us unless we hit a powerful string of Electropowers, which could be the case in fairness. But yeah, Zebstrika are going to help us close games in most situations. Onto the trainers, very, very basic stuff really. Thanks to the awesome ability of Emolga, I feel like we get away with just playing 3 Pokecoms as all the search that we require, because basically everything we get for free with Emolga as soon as we find that card, and we already have Elm to get them as well, which is great, because the Emolga also has 60 hit points, but the comms obviously help out, getting that Zebstrika line into play, getting that Tapu Koko as well, which is a pretty big deal. Even if it is just 40 damage, it's really going to give this deck a push and make sure you don't run out of fuel. 3 of the new Great Catcher. I've already mentioned how important this card is for the deck, because we will be trying to gust up the Dedennes, or if we're 2-shotting GXs, we've got to drag them back up and finish them off. So we get to discard 2 cards. Well, we have to discard 2 cards from our hand. Then you switch one of your opponent's benched GX or EX with that active, which is really awesome. 4 copies of Electropower. The sort of raw base output of this deck isn't all that powerful, I would say. Most of the time, if you have to start swinging, for example, with the Raichu, after you've done 1 Snuggly Generator, you're normally around that like 120 sort of mark. So Electropowers means that you'll be still getting 2 shots even on tag teams, and it means we can try and stack these up as well if we get lucky in certain situations. We then have 4 Pokegears. I really want to hit Elm on turn 1, because that's like the most powerful supporter for us, so it really does start with the Elm. Once you've used that Elm, you can Snuggly Generator for a lot of value, and that's when the deck starts really flowing. So Pokegear really important for that aspect on the first turn, but also we play a couple of like 1 and 2 of supporters, like Brock, which might be important for reloading our Raichus, or Rosa as well, which is a great card for picking out certain cards, be it Electropower, be it that Great Catcher, all that sort of stuff. That does move us on in nicely to the supporters. 1 Brock's Grit, as I just said, reloading Raichus as well as energy cards. Rosa, the new fantastic supporter card that really does help out non-GX decks. When one of your Pokemon was knocked out, you can go ahead and search your deck for a Pokemon, a trainer, and a basic energy card. I think that's another reason why we can get away with just playing 3 Pokecoms, because Rosa also sort of fills that gap of helping us get things like Blitzles and Zebstrikas into play. You can go ahead and grab those Great Catchers. You can go ahead and grab Electropowers as well. So it's kind of like a better version of Volkner in this deck, just because we are non-GX based. We also play a couple copies of Erika, just to increase our hand size, to sort of supplement the 4 copies of Cynthia that you'll basically see in every deck, if they are sort of setup based. And then we have that 4 Professor Elm as well. Pretty standard stuff, gets all your promo Pikachus and of course your Emolgas, which are both really big deals. Onto the energy. 12 lightning, I think that should be plenty. Plenty for us to have in the opening hand, even though we're not playing a draw supporter most of the time. We'll just be scouting with Elm. And also plenty to get out of the deck, even if we've prized a couple. And it's enough for us to like recycle with Tapu Koko. We can throw some into the bin if we want to with our great catchers pretty easily. So yeah, I think overall that's just a pretty reasonable count all in all. So there's the full list. Pause now if you want to and take a screenshot, but it'll also be in the description as per usual. For tech options, I've thought about Lana's Fishing Rod, and if you do play the Fishing Rod, it might overtake Brock, I would say. I think 12 overall is probably enough energy for you to like see yourself out throughout the entire game. And yeah, it could be pretty reasonable. I think overall the Fishing Rod could be okay. If you do go down that route, you might want to play some other like basic Pokemon. I think my only real fear around like basic attackers like Xurkitree or Hooper or Zapdos, those sorts of attackers that maybe are a little bit faster, I guess, is that you're just going away from Snuggly Generator, and that's like your win condition, basically. You need to hit Snuggly Generator as quickly as possible to start setting up your board. So if you are going to go for some sort of flashy, basic type attackers just to synergize with Fishing Rod, I think you really got to be careful about that route. Some stadiums could also be in here for sure. We're currently playing no stadiums whatsoever. Shrine could definitely help out. If you do play Shrine, there's also the option for you playing the Mimikyu, which could obviously help out against the Mewtwo matchups, and maybe even Silvally Volk, which also could be pretty awkward. And Lysander Labs could be pretty important for things like Malamar and Gallade matchups, because they are spell tag reliant. I think ultimately I don't have much space to play many copies of these cards, so it feels like most of the time your opponent would just sort of like bounce these eventually anyway. That's the reason why I've committed no spaces to them whatsoever, because it feels like, yes, these stadiums can be helpful, but I don't think it's enough help to be warranted like 3 spaces in the deck at least. So yeah, at the moment I'm just sort of saying no to those cards. Another option that I thought about having in this archetype was having the red and blue supporter in this deck, especially with something like Silvally. So at the moment we're playing a Zebra to sort of stamp proof us, but another way that we could get some extra burst acceleration into the deck could be by using red and blue alongside Silvally. It gets you 40 like damage in play immediately from the supporter itself, getting energies, but also the Silvally provides like a drawing aspect and a backup attacking threat if we really need to. My only real concern is that it's putting like GXs into play, which could make us even worse against non-GX matchups, and also give like GX decks a win condition just by gusting and killing this guy. So that's the reason why I haven't gone the Silvally line, but it definitely could increase our like raw output, I guess, as you could say. So it might be worth experimenting, just like a 2 of red and blue and then like a 2/2 Silvally line. Definitely something I want to explore for sure. Onto the matchup overview, I think Mewtwo is definitely an awkward matchup. It's one of those things where they can just go first, high roll double welder, and get that Espeon Deoxys off, and really ruin your day because they've just knocked out a bunch of Pikachus really early on, which could be very ugly. You don't have any way that you could come back from that really. Obviously, if you can if you go first, I don't think it's that bad. They can only really like do it on like a couple like Pachirisu and Emolga, and you don't really care about that too much, but I'm very worried if they go first and they do get that high roll of double welder attach. Malamar, and same thing for Gallade. They sort of fall into the same category because they're probably going to be spell tag based non-GX variants, which are pretty hard for us to get over. There'll always be those low hit point Pokemon in play. The Pachirisus and the Emolgas, they're just part of the deck for sure, so spell tags can easily find their way onto those cards, and then they'll be doing like 1-for-1 trading, but they'll also have the spell tags to eventually jump ahead in the race. Spiritomb, I think, will be awkward. Normally, we need to spend a turn using Snuggly Generator. That can easily be a turn that they can just like attach a Rainbow Energy and take the first prize, and then they'll never go behind you on prizes because you're just going to be trading 1-for-1s. Same sort of thing for Baby Blacephalon. They can just welder attach and smack you, whereas you're really reliant on doing that Snuggly Generator non-stop. So I would say that basically every non-GX deck is like a bad matchup for us. The only ones I haven't said are like bad matchups is like Tangrowth because we evolve, and Alolan Ninetales because they can be slow as well, and they probably rely on using Dedenne just to draw cards. Well, mainly to discard their tools, so they're not really like a full-on non-GX deck. I've also put Silvally Volk as potentially an awkward matchup, just because Volcarona is so annoying at pinging down our stuff. Again, it could be one of those things, if we're worried enough about Volcarona and Mewtwo, we could go down that route of having Mimikyu Shrine. The only real awkward thing is we only play 3 com and no real search for the Mimikyu, so it wouldn't be all that easy to sort of get it going in the early game. And again, like, it's more spaces that this deck can't really commit, because it feels like you've got to max out the Pokemon counts, and we've got a pretty conservative support account right now. Maybe that could be some wiggle room. And we're also a little bit conservative on energy, so there might be a few slots here and there that you can try and squeeze, but I think overall this deck wants to just be rinse and repeat if it wants to get any wins whatsoever, so that's the reason why I've gone very safe on all the counts right now. The Floors Buck deck that I profiled, some people still don't believe in it, of course, but I feel like this archetype has no answers to it whatsoever, so the Floors Buck deck will probably just grind you down. For my closing thoughts, that's it really. The deck doesn't like facing other non-GX builds, and that's just still something that the deck can't really get around. So it's really hoping to be walking into a meta with plenty of GX decks floating around. I think the biggest issue is Malamar gets a lot more tools this set that makes it viable. Great Catch is a great card for Malamar, I think. And also there's some new like psychic attackers that they can benefit from, so I don't really see Malamar going anywhere necessarily. I still think it remains pretty solidly in tier 2 at least, so that's always going to be the gatekeeper for non-GX decks, I'm afraid. It's kind of one of those things where you've probably heard that 1,000 times at this point, but it's still the case today, even for new decks coming out, just because we have low hit point basics on our board in every matchup, because we can't play any differently against them. We just have to still Snuggly Generator and hope that we can like get ahead of them. Maybe they have enough slow turns that you can grab wins against them, but for the most part, if both decks sort of play their usual setup, you'll end up losing, I would say. So yeah, that's a little bit ugly. And I think if some decks can sort of figure out Raichu and they can play more conservatively and don't put down lots of the Denes to get going, I know that's not always easier, like it's easier said than done, right? Mewtwo not putting down to Dene and like Welder Box not putting down to Dene and all that sort of stuff sounds very difficult. But if some decks just happen to like draw into decent hands on the opening turns and don't need to use Dene change, that could really spell trouble for this deck, because I feel like you'll just sort of peter out with damage and not really have enough turns to close the game. Maybe that's me just being a little bit pessimistic of the damage output of this deck, because I'm always assuming that you're like losing 20 damage, then recovering that 20 damage just with attachments, but there's still like the Tapu Koko bursting energies into play. There's also, you know, just those games where your opponent doesn't hit into you straight away and you get the luxury of a second Snuggly Generator, and then you're just going to be flying and you'll be hitting like 200 a turn easily and not worry about any of that sort of stuff. But it really does feel like this wants to be a poacher-style deck, trying to knock out Dedenes whenever you see them, essentially, is what I'm thinking about. And you're trying to, like, two-shot a tag team, then see a Dedenne, then, like, knock out something else along the way. Like, that's basically what you're looking to do, I think. So, yeah, I don't really know about that for certain, but it's just sort of how the deck feels to me, because your damage output isn't going to be phenomenal at any single point in the game. You're just trying to, like, run into Electropowers when you can and make the most out of those sorts of turns. But yeah, I feel like it'll be a reasonable archetype. Definitely a very great budget archetype for players, because it doesn't need Jirachi. It like actually doesn't want to play Jirachi, even if you could. Like, even if you had the budget for them, you actively want to have things that say Nuzzle in play at all times. So you don't want to play anything like Dedenne GX or Jirachi, so it actively choose it, like it forces you to play a budget style build, which is really cool. I think the promo Pikachus are like going to be the most expensive cards, but I don't even think they'll be worth too much. So yeah, very nice budget deck for players to pick up if they're just starting out the game. Very rinse and repeat strategy as well, so nothing too crazy about it, not too tricky to play at all. So yeah, could be one of those decks if you're just getting into the game that you could definitely explore, and it won't break the bank at all. So yeah, that's going to be it for today's video, guys. Let me know what other decks you want to see from Cosmic Eclipse, and let me know if there's any other ways you've tried to build this archetype. So I'll hear it all down below. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in another video tomorrow. Cheers.